"Oh no, not now," Ethan Marshall shouted into his phone, his voice bouncing off the glass walls of his 45th floor office at Wellington Industries. He paced nervously, glancing out at the sleek black cars pulling up to the front of the building. The Chinese delegation had arrived. Inside, panic was building. The translator had just cancelled due to a family emergency, with only 15 minutes left before the most important meeting of Ethan's career. A $200 million deal was on the line, and without a translator, the entire negotiation could fall apart. "Mr. Wellington, I've called everyone I could find," said Victoria, his executive assistant, her phone still pressed to her ear. "No professional translator is available on such short notice." Ethan tugged at his expensive tie, sweat forming on his forehead. He had spent 20 years building his company, and now everything was at risk, all because of a last-minute communication issue. The Chinese executives valued proper etiquette and clear communication. Translation apps or hand gestures wouldn't cut it. Then, a quiet voice broke the tense silence. "Excuse me, Mr. Wellington. I speak fluent Mandarin." Everyone turned toward the sound. Standing in the corner, holding a cleaning cloth, was Naomi Carter, a 28-year-old member of the cleaning staff, dressed in her navy blue janitor's uniform. She looked completely out of place in the high-stakes corporate setting. For 3 years, Naomi had worked quietly and efficiently on the executive floors. Most people barely noticed her. Until now. Victoria gave a small, uncomfortable laugh. "Naomi, this isn't the time for jokes. This is a multi-million-dollar deal." Ethan looked at Naomi closely, as if really seeing her for the first time. "You speak Mandarin?" he asked, doubt clear in his voice. "Mandarin, Cantonese, and a bit of Taiwanese," Naomi replied calmly. "I studied Oriental linguistics at Howard University before I started working here." She stood tall, not backing down. While cleaning those offices day after day, she had absorbed more than anyone had realized the way meetings ran, the business strategies, the power dynamics. She had been preparing in silence. Victoria's smile faded, replaced by disbelief. "Ethan, you can't be serious. You're considering letting a cleaning lady run the most important meeting of the year." But Ethan wasn't so sure anymore. There was something about Naomi, the way she spoke, the quiet strength in her posture. "Prove it," he said. "Say something in Mandarin." Naomi took a deep breath, then spoke fluently and confidently. "Women, Henrongxing, Zaigali, Yunimon, Shangyu. Shiwang women, Dehezuo, Hui, Delai Shuangfang, Deliaben." Even though Ethan didn't understand the words, he could tell she was speaking with ease and respect. "What did you say?" he asked. "It's a formal business greeting," Naomi explained. "It means we're honored to meet you here and hope our partnership will bring mutual success." Victoria folded her arms, clearly unhappy. "And what do you think the Chinese executives will say when they see a janitor sitting at the table?" At that moment, Naomi remembered something. 6 months earlier, she had overheard Victoria crying in the executive bathroom, complaining to someone on the phone about that black girl always lurking around important meetings. Naomi had stayed silent then, but she remembered every word. Ethan watched Naomi, a thoughtful expression on his face. In her eyes, he saw something deeper: wisdom, confidence, and grace. She wasn't just the cleaning lady. For 3 years, she had listened, learned, and paid attention more than many of the people wearing suits around her. "You have 20 minutes, he finally said. "Change into something professional and meet me in the conference room." Naomi nodded and hurried out. Victoria leaned toward Ethan, whispering angrily, "You've lost your mind. When this blows up in your face, it'll ruin your career." But Ethan didn't respond. For the first time in a long while, he realized that the most talented people often go unnoticed, right under our noses. What no one in that office knew was that Naomi had been preparing for this moment far longer than anyone could imagine. And Victoria was about to learn a hard truth. Judging someone by their appearance is one of the biggest mistakes a person can make. 20 minutes later, the atmosphere in the conference room was thick with tension. The sound of footsteps made everyone turn. It was Naomi. She had changed out of her cleaning uniform and now wore a simple black outfit borrowed from the receptionist, neat, professional, and perfectly fitting for the moment. Her hair was neatly pulled back into a bun, and she carried a notepad like any other executive. "Jesus Christ," muttered Marcus, the company's CFO, clearly shocked. "Is that really the same person?" Victoria leaned over to her assistant and whispered, not bothering to hide the bitterness in her tone. "You can put a jewel in a lump of coal, but it's still coal inside." The Chinese delegation had arrived right on time. 5 sharply dressed executives, speaking softly in Mandarin as they admired the Manhattan skyline through the conference room's tall windows. Ethan stepped forward to greet them and began the formal introductions. When it came to Naomi, he chose his words carefully. "This is Naomi Carter, our international relations specialist for the Asian market." He didn't mention her usual role, and for good reason. Mr. Liang, the leader of the delegation, greeted Naomi with a respectful bow. When Naomi responded in flawless Mandarin, thanking him for arriving punctually and expressing her honor at meeting them, his face lit up in genuine surprise and respect. For the first 15 minutes, Naomi translated with complete mastery, not just the words, but the tone, the unspoken etiquette, and even the small cultural jokes that made the Chinese executives laugh. The meeting flowed beautifully. Everything felt smooth, professional, and impressive. But then, Victoria struck. With a sugary smile that didn't reach her eyes, she cut in. "Naomi," she said, "maybe we should tell our guests a bit more about your unique journey at this company." Ethan threw Victoria a sharp look, silently telling her to stop, but she didn't. "I just think it's so inspiring," she continued, "to see someone reinvent themselves like that. From janitor to negotiator. A real rags to riches story." Her tone was sweet on the surface, but full of poison underneath. Naomi's heart tightened. She knew that feeling. The quiet shame that comes when people try to reduce your life to a pity story. It reminded her of when she had to leave Howard University during her junior year. Her mother, who had diabetes, had lost her job. Naomi had left school to care for her and take on the bills, putting her future on hold. She took a breath and responded with grace. "Life has a funny way of teaching us. Opportunities can appear when we least expect them." She turned toward the delegation and added, "And who would have thought? Someone who was cleaning this very room 3 years ago is now helping lead today's discussion." She paused, letting that message settle. It speaks to how deeply our company values diversity in every form. The room fell into an awkward silence. Naomi noticed it instantly, the subtle shift in Mr. Liang's face. Not disgust, but a stiff discomfort. In Chinese culture, Business hierarchies matter deeply. Status and rank are not just labels, they define how you're treated and how seriously you're taken. Ethan quickly stepped in, trying to repair the damage. What Victoria meant to say is that we appreciate talent wherever it comes from, but it was too late. Naomi could feel the energy in the room had changed. The warm, easy connection was gone. The Chinese executives were still polite, but they were more formal now, guarded. She could sense their curiosity turning into skepticism. And at that moment, something shifted inside her. For 3 years, she had cleaned those rooms while deals were made and strategies discussed. She had listened quietly, learned everything, including the mistakes people thought no one noticed. Mistakes like the time Victoria exaggerated quarterly, sales numbers to impress a potential investor, or when she took full credit for a junior employee's project, then let that same person be fired for going over budget, or when she used insider knowledge during her private negotiations with a competitor, something strictly against company policy. Naomi remembered it all, because while they saw her as invisible, she had been watching and learning. The meeting wrapped up with a vague promise from the delegation. They'd carefully review the proposal in diplomatic language that often meant maybe if nothing better comes along. As the Chinese executives left, Victoria couldn't help but gloat. Well, that was interesting, she said loudly while shuffling her notes. Next time, maybe we should be a bit more transparent about who's actually on the team. Ethan's jaw tightened. He was clearly furious. But before he could speak, Naomi stood up, calm, poised. Victoria, she said gently, her voice low but confident. Mr. Liang said something to me before he left. Victoria looked up, intrigued. Oh, what did he say? He said he was impressed by my language skills, but a bit confused by how the hierarchy played out in the meeting. Naomi paused, letting the words hang in the air. He asked me to call him later to clarify some cultural misunderstandings from our presentation. Victoria's smirk faded just slightly. What kind of misunderstandings? Mainly, Naomi said. Why the person responsible for leading the conversation in Mandarin wasn't introduced as the lead negotiator. In Mandarin business culture, there's a powerful unspoken rule. Whoever speaks the language controls the conversation. Naomi smiled gently. Mr. Liang said he'd like to understand our internal structure better before making any final decisions. Victoria's face paled. The implication was clear. For 3 years, Naomi had been invisible, just another face in a janitor's uniform. But today proved that invisibility can be a quiet kind of power. When no one sees you, no one watches what you're watching. And Naomi had been watching everything, every insult, every brush, every dirty little secret whispered in those shiny hallways. And without knowing it, they were training her to become a strategist, one who now knew every flaw, every weak link, and every lie carefully hidden behind smiles and titles. 2 hours after the shaky meeting ended, Naomi was back in uniform, pushing her cleaning cart through the marble corridors of the executive floor. But now, every step felt sharper, every glance more purposeful. She had walked these hallways for 3 years, quietly mapping conversations, memorizing who said what, and observing patterns, especially in Victoria's office. Victoria, of course, hadn't changed. As Naomi passed, she overheard her laughing with Clara from accounting. Well, look who's back where she belongs. Victoria said loudly, making sure everyone in earshot heard her. After that pathetic little performance today, at least we all know who's who. Naomi kept moving. Her hands cleaned, but her mind stayed sharp, replaying everything Victoria had said over the years. Because while she scrubbed windows and emptied trash bins, she had seen it all. Personal emails left open on computer screens, phone calls about shady contract deals, and especially secret documents shoved into bottom drawers files on how Victoria had manipulated smaller companies out of bids using illegal methods. Victoria kept talking. "You know what really gets me?" she said to Clara, her voice full of arrogance. "Ethan actually thought a cleaning lady could save a $200 million deal, as if scrubbing toilets for 3 years qualifies you to sit at the table with real executives." At that moment, Naomi's phone vibrated. A text in Mandarin. It was from Mr. Liang. "Ms. Parker, I'd like to meet privately to discuss your future. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., Mandarin Caf, Sisha Ann Street. I believe we have a proposal that may interest you." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't about just translating anymore. This was about recognition. Mr. Liang had seen what others didn't, not just her skill, but her calm under pressure, her awareness and her integrity. That evening, in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, Naomi opened a file she had been quietly building for 2 years. It wasn't revenge. It was insurance. It was preparation. The file was titled Wellington Industries Irregularities. Inside were 63 pages of evidence. Printed emails Victoria had thought she deleted. Weekend call logs. Photos of confidential documents. And worst of all, clear proof that Victoria had intentionally sabotaged contracts involving black-owned businesses over the past 18 months. Naomi had watched Victoria lie to clients, steal credit for projects, and block promotions of talented employees because they didn't fit the company image. Now, all of it was documented, quietly, carefully, completely. The next morning, at 10 a.m. sharp, Naomi arrived at Mandarin Caf. She wore a modest but elegant outfit, one she had bought with her early college savings. Simple, sharp, confident. Mr. Liang was already there, joined by a poised, professional woman who introduced herself as Angela Kim, Vice President of International Development. Mr. Liang smiled and spoke in Mandarin. "Yesterday, I saw not just your fluency, but something more important. Your dignity under pressure." Lisa leaned in. "We're expanding operations across North America. We need someone who understands both Asian and Western business cultures. Someone who knows how things really work behind the polished doors." Mr. Liang added with a knowing glance. "Someone who doesn't bow to small people in big chairs." For the next 2 hours, Naomi spoke with clarity and insight. She discussed strategy, market behavior, and cultural blind spots in Western business, especially how Asian investors were often underestimated or misunderstood. She even hinted carefully at some of the questionable things she had seen at competing firms. Lisa listened closely. Then she slid a business card across the table. Naomi read it aloud. Parker and Associates International Business Consulting. Beneath it, an annual salary. That was 5 times what she earned at Wellington Industries. "We believe in real talent," Lisa said. "Consider our offer." Mr. Liang stood and looked Naomi in the eyes. "We only ask one thing to begin your journey with us," he said. "We'd like you to help us investigate some irregularities we've found in Wellington's recent contracts. There is evidence," Mr. Liang had said, "of serious violations, ones that may break international trade laws." Naomi held the business card with steady hands. Just a day ago, she was invisible, treated like part of the furniture. Now, two of Asia's top business leaders were offering her more than a job. They were offering her a seat at the table, a real partnership. Lisa leaned in and said quietly, "There's an emergency board meeting at Wellington tomorrow. The Chinese delegation has filed a formal complaint about contract manipulation. You might want to attend." That night, Naomi called her mother. "Mum, remember how you always said patience is a smart woman's best weapon?" "Of course, baby. Why?" "I think I finally get it now." As she hung up and looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline, Naomi felt something settle inside her. Tomorrow, everyone at Wellington, especially Victoria, would learn the hard truth. 3 years of being invisible had created something far more powerful than a bitter employee. It had created a strategist, someone who knew every weakness, every lie, every secret, and unlike those who judged others by appearances, Naomi had learned that true strength comes from watching, waiting, and striking when no one expects it. The next morning, the executive boardroom at Wellington Industries was filled with unease. The air was thick with tension. Ethan had called an emergency meeting after receiving an official report from the Chinese delegation. The accusations were serious enough to trigger a possible federal investigation. Victoria entered the room confidently, dressed in a bold red suit and high heels, heels that echoed across the floor like they owned the place. She had spent all night preparing her defense. In her mind, the plan was simple: blame the cleaning lady. She faced the 7 board members. "Well," she began, "I think we all know why we're here. Like I said yesterday, it was reckless to involve an unqualified employee in such a high-stakes negotiation. And now, we're facing the consequences, $200 million in jeopardy." That's when the door opened quietly. Naomi entered. She wore a sleek grey suit, not borrowed this time, but bought the night before using the advance from her new consulting contract. She held a leather briefcase, and her calm, confident walk silenced the room. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said, taking a seat next to Ethan. "I was putting together some important information for this meeting." Victoria's face twisted in irritation. "With all due respect, Ethan," she snapped, "why is she here? This is an executive-level discussion." Ethan didn't even blink. "She's here," he said coldly, "because the Chinese delegation specifically asked for her presence to clarify the complaints they submitted." Naomi opened her laptop slowly, confidently. "Yesterday, Mr. Liang shared some troubling findings," she said. "They uncovered internal actions that suggest bid, rigging, and sabotage of rival companies. Some of those actions appear to have been intentional and unethical." Victoria exploded. "This is absurd. What kind of so-called evidence could a cleaning lady possibly have about executive operations?" Naomi turned her eyes to her. Her voice didn't rise. Her tone didn't waver. "The kind of evidence you collect when you're invisible for 3 years, and people say things around you because they assume you don't matter." Victoria's smile faltered. For the first time, fear flickered in her eyes. Naomi connected her laptop to the projector. The screen lit up. "This first email," she said, was sent from Victoria to a client 6 months ago. It contains confidential details about a competing company's bid, the Johnson Group. The room fell completely silent. Victoria tried to interrupt. Naomi didn't stop. This second document, she continued, shows how project costs were deliberately inflated, but only for teams led by Black and Latino employees. Those projects were later cancelled, and the blame shifted to employee incompetence. Spreadsheets appeared on the screen. Emails, meeting notes, time-stamped records from the office security system. 3 years of quiet observation now unfolding in front of the entire board. "This is a setup," Victoria shouted, standing up. "She's trying to take revenge. She faked this evidence because I exposed her true position." Naomi stayed seated. Her voice was calm. "Mr. Ethan," she said, "the next recording is from your own building's security. Audio recorded 8 months ago." She pressed play. Through the speakers, Victoria's voice echoed. "We can't let these types of people think they belong in executive meetings. It's about keeping the company's image clean and professional." Victoria's face drained of color. She remembered that conversation, a private discussion with Marcus. She never imagined anyone would hear it again. But Naomi wasn't done. "This next file," she said, "is from just 2 weeks ago. Victoria instructs the receptionist to remove resumes from candidates whose names sound too ethnic." The room froze. Gasps, disbelief, shame. The board members stared at the screen, then at Victoria. All the arrogance had drained from her face. This wasn't a cleaning lady's revenge. This was a reckoning. The final and climactic section of your powerful story, rewritten in a smooth, cinematic style with simple, impactful language. It maintains continuity with the earlier parts and ends with a deeply satisfying, emotional resolution. One of the board members, Mr. Dawson, a seasoned executive in his 60s and one of the few Black directors at the company, leaned forward, his face solemn. "Victoria, is any of this true?" That's taken out of context." Victoria stammered, visibly sweating now. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under to maintain standards." "Company standards," Naomi said softly, "include ethics, fairness, and respect for federal laws, all of which have been ignored repeatedly for the last 18 months. Ethan turned to Victoria, his face hard as stone. "You have 30 seconds, he said, "to explain why you shouldn't be fired immediately," and reported to the district attorney. Victoria looked around the room, desperately searching for support. All she saw were cold stares and disappointment. "You're making a huge mistake," she whispered, her voice breaking. "She's just a bitter cleaning lady." Ethan cut her off. "She," he said firmly, "is our new director of international relations. And you're fired." The room fell into a stunned silence. Victoria stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, the weight of her downfall sinking in. "Your access is revoked," Ethan continued. "Security will escort you to collect your belongings." He paused, then added, "And given the seriousness of the evidence, we're forwarding everything to the federal attorney's office." As the security guards escorted her out, Victoria turned and looked at Naomi with bitterness burning in her eyes. "You may have won today," she hissed, "but that doesn't change what you really are." Naomi held her gaze, calm and unwavering. "You're right," she said. "I am exactly who I've always been. Someone who observes, learns, and strikes at the right moment. The only difference now is, I'm finally where I belong. 3 hours later, the board meeting officially ended with one last announcement. Naomi Carter was now the Director of International Relations. As the room emptied, Ethan pulled her aside. "How did you manage all this?" he asked, still amazed. 3 years of records, emails, audio. Naomi smiled, truly at peace for the first time in years. "When people treat you like furniture," she said, "they forget furniture has ears and a memory." Victoria underestimated the power of invisibility and overestimated the strength of her own arrogance. As she looked out at the Manhattan skyline from her new office, Naomi knew something important. The best revenge wasn't destroying Victoria. It was building something greater. 6 months later, Naomi sat behind a sleek glass desk on the 38th floor of Wellington Industries, reviewing contract files written in Mandarin, Cantonese, and English. Her work had already brought in over $400 million in new deals. Naomi, her assistant, Clara, said, poking her head in, "The South Korean delegation has arrived. They're eager to meet the woman who tripled our Asian business." Through the window, Naomi smiled at the skyline. A city she used to clean for now listened to her. Her $300,000 salary had helped her mother get the best care for her diabetes. Naomi had also completed her master's degree from Columbia University through an executive program. Another dream checked off the list. "What about the Forbes interview next week?" Clara asked, flipping through her planner. "Confirmed," Naomi replied, adjusting her navy blue blazer. "They want to talk about the most influential young executives of the year." Across the city, Victoria sat in a small apartment in Queens, her life in ruins. After losing her penthouse, she'd been hit with a $50,000 fine and banned from holding any executive position with federal contracts for 5 years. Her name had been in every business paper, a warning to others. That morning, she had seen Naomi's face on the cover of Business Week, beside the headline, "The Translator Who Revolutionized Global Business." The sting of irony was unbearable. Back at Wellington, Ethan addressed the board with pride. "Naomi Carter didn't just save our Chinese deal," he declared. "She opened markets we thought were out of reach." Mr. Dawson stood up, looking around the room. "In all my decades in corporate America, I've never seen a transformation as powerful as Naomi's. She's proof that's true. Talent has no race, no class, and no patience for prejudice." Applause erupted. Naomi sat quietly, remembering how just 7 months ago she used to scrub this very floor. That evening, in her new Upper East Side apartment, Naomi received a phone call. It was her mother. "I saw your interview today, baby. You spoke so well about second chances." "I learned from the best," Naomi said with a proud smile. "You always told me they can try to break us, but they can't erase what we know, or what we're capable of." During the interview, Naomi had been asked about Victoria. Did she hold any resentment? Her answer was graceful and honest. "Victoria gave me the greatest gift. She showed me exactly what I didn't want to become. Her arrogance taught me that real power isn't about stepping on others, it's about lifting them up." 3 weeks later, Naomi stood on a stage at Howard University, her old college. She had come to announce the launch of her new scholarship, the Second Chance Program, full scholarships for low-income students forced to pause their education to care for family. No one should have to choose between their family and their future, she said to an emotional crowd of 500 students. That year alone, 20 students received full scholarships. Far away, in her small apartment, Victoria watched the speech online. She closed her laptop quietly. For the first time in months, her tears weren't bitter. They were real. Maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to feel something new. Regret. Back at Wellington Industries, Naomi walked through the same halls where, just 3 years earlier, she had pushed a cleaning cart in silence. Now, things had changed. Young executives greeted her with respect. Assistants asked her for career advice. And more importantly, she had become a mentor to 5 promising employees in lower-level departments who reminded her of herself, quiet, overlooked, but full of potential. During a private meeting one afternoon, Ethan turned to her with thoughtful eyes. "You know what amazes me the most about your story?" he asked. "You could have used everything you knew about Victoria to destroy her completely, but you didn't. You only revealed her professional misconduct. You kept it fair." Naomi gave him a quiet smile. "The best revenge," she said, "is not to ruin someone. It's to build something so strong, so inspiring, that it makes everything they did to hurt you completely irrelevant." Naomi Carter's journey became more than just a personal success story. It became a lesson that real talent, combined with dignity, patience, and preparation, can rise above any injustice. She didn't fight fire with fire. She turned 3 years of being invisible into her greatest strength. She proved something powerful. Sometimes, the most dangerous people in a room are the quiet ones, the ones watching, listening, learning, waiting for their moment to shine. Victoria tried to bring Naomi down using arrogance and prejudice, but in the end, Victoria only built the staircase that Naomi climbed to the top. Naomi's story sent a message through the entire corporate world. True leadership doesn't come from power or privilege. It comes from recognizing the worth in people others overlook. It comes from lifting others up, not keeping them down. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that dignity, hard work, and resilience always find their way to the top, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this. Because no matter how invisible someone may seem today, they might just be tomorrow's most unstoppable force.